Redditors who knew a missing person who was later found. What happened? An acquaintance of mine from church went missing for a while. She disappeared from a local college. I don't know the whole story, but when she was found she had amnesia and was a completely different person. Changed her name and everything. This is called dissociative fugue. Some people just move away and forget who they were entirely while believing they're a different person. There was this guy in my town, early 20s, who got a serious head injury in a bike accident. He was in the hospital for a while, but he got better and was released from the hospital. He stayed at his parents' house after getting released and seemed fine. About a week later his parents wake up and he's not there. A backpack is missing but his wallet, phone, all that is there. Lots of searches. No sign of him. A few days go by and a police department a few states away calls. They have him. But other than managing to come up with his name, he is having trouble remembering anything. How he ended up there, which was pieced together because he didn't remember, was the weirdest bit. Despite leaving his wallet behind, he apparently had taken some money or somehow acquired some and traveled an hour, probably hitchhiking, but this part no one ever really figured out, to a Greyhound bus station where he bought a ticket and got on a bus. While on the bus he befriends random hippie traveler dude, the hero of this story. They get off at the same place. Traveler dude is planning on camping, invites this guy to camp with him. Traveler dude originally thinks the guy is high, but eventually realizes something is actually wrong with him. Specifically that the guy doesn't know his name. So Traveler dude comes up with a plan. They go to the library, log on to a computer, and he asks the guy to think of any names or places he can come up with. Then he searches Facebook. The guy manages to remember the name of one of his friends correctly, and nearly all of his friends have posted his missing person flyer to their Facebook page. So that makes it pretty clear what his name is, and they call the police. He recovered more, eventually remembered the stuff from before hitting his head. Never how he got to the bus or where he was going, though. A college friend who dropped out went missing around Christmas time. Turns out he got mad one day and decided to just drive across the country without telling or talking to anyone for 2 weeks. A girl I went to high school with ran off with her boyfriend. Her dad went looking for her and found her bag with my phone number in it and handed it to the police. The police called me at 3 AM asking if I knew where she was. Told them she was with her sketchy boyfriend and they should go back and look again. We barely knew each other. We had one class together and she'd revealed her plan to run away with this craphead like it was the coolest thing in the world. While her friends had all been supportive when she told them this is so romantic. Your dad is such a dong for not letting you see him. I was the only one who told her it was freaking stupid and there was something wrong with a 24-year-old man wanting to date a 13-year-old girl. Then I gave her my number and told her to call if she needed anything because I knew she was going to do it anyway. She was safe by the way, but she never forgave me. Someone in college went missing and it was a huge thing. They eventually found him cut up in the trunk of his gay lover. The dude that killed him was in the closet and didn't want anyone to find out. The way they found out he was in his trunk. He went to a frat party and drove a bunch of friends in the car and they figured it out by the smell. I had an acquaintance from high school go missing. He was found dead in the backseat of his car, which was parked in the back of a shopping mall's parking lot. Unfortunately, it's a bit of mystery. He died because he didn't take some kind of medicine that he needed daily, but no one could figure out why he was parked there and in the backseat. Guy I knew from uni went missing for a couple of years. Got a phone call from a friend I hadn't heard from in about 3 years asking if I had any information. I didn't know him well so I had no info. I found out a year or so later he had turned up. He's gone for a visit to Amsterdam. Really liked it and decided to stay. Freaking idiot, forgot to tell anyone this. One day he decided to finally call his parents and see how they were. Seriously, dude? My sister's classmate, 14F, went missing at the same time her home with her adoptive parents inside. Burned. They thought she was kidnapped because they had more money than the average. Turns out she killed her adoptive parents with the help of a friend and her 20-year-old BF. By drugging and strangling them. She disappeared because they were planning what to do with the insurance's money. After the murder they got some hot dogs and bought an engagement ring with her now dead parents' card. Both males said the same story about her being the planner. She was missing for 11 days. They found her buried in a shallow grave in a field. She'd been completely beat up, then thrown off a cliff. Girl was kidnapped by her boyfriend. She ran away from him at a stoplight several days later if I recall correctly. She is doing well now, and the now ex-boyfriend is in jail for kidnapping, false imprisonment, I think, and grand theft auto for stealing her truck. He didn't come home from a business trip and his phone went straight to voicemail. 4 days later, he was found dead by suicide in a hotel room. It still pisses me off that the police found him on the second day but didn't notify anyone. I spent 4 days in hellish panic calling hospitals, jails, etc. I went to a Christian high school. Around Easter break one year, the chaplain went missing during a camping trip. He had made arrangements to camp for a few days solo, then meet up with his wife and kids at the campsite to do family stuff. He called home a day into the trip and said some guys fishing had taken a few shots at him while he was on his jet ski for disturbing the fish. No big deal, everything was fine. Wife and kids show up at the weekend. The site is trashed. Jet skis are gone. The car is sitting with the doors open and everything strewn about. Cops are called. Everyone starts searching the forest. They start looking for the fisherman. Then they find his wallet in shallow water near his campsite with it and credit card still in it. They start dredging the lake. By the end of about a week, the cops abruptly announced they are looking for a black pickup truck. That weekend we had a prayer vigil thing that was televised. Lo and behold, the chaplain sees a broadcast from some flop house in California, feels the Jesus and comes clean that he faked his own death and ran off. Coincidentally felt the Jesus just as police followed tips to a truck he'd purchased with cash and videos of him at gas stations going west. Yeah, he faked the whole thing. Had a lovely wife and 2 little kids. We never really found out more than that. My cousin actually went missing for 3 days. He got a bad grade and ran away before his father came to the house. The cops found him 2 days later not knowing he was running away. They just thought he was lost. When they asked him about his full name, he told the truth, but he had the same name as a famous soccer player in our country, so they kept asking him the same question until one cop got angry and slapped him. Then they found out a missing person report about him and returned him to us. My brother's college roommate went missing for about 6 years. He had a penchant for borrowing money, buying nose candy, and not paying people back. Last we heard, he was dealing and working with south of the border drug dealers. His dad called my brother about 2 years in asking if he had found anything out. At the 3-year mark, we just assumed he was dead. He shows up out of the blue right around 6 years into being missing. He had been surfing and island hopping around the Caribbean and Mexico. It turns out that he owed a lot of people money and had burnt all of his bridges stateside and decided to just play around until people forgot about it. I can't imagine the damage he did to his parents. What a crapwood. This was around 1981 when I was 14. An 18-year-old girl disappeared. People were searching for her and there were alleged sightings of her. 2 years later, her stepfather admitted that he accidentally killed her, cut open the floor under his and her mother's bed, put her naked body in the hole under the bed. He said he had to take her clothes off to fit her in the hole, put the floor back along with the rug, and put the bed back over it. Her body was there while they slept on the bed for 2 years. If I remember correctly, he was charged with manslaughter and I can't remember if he went to prison at all. His wife, her mother, stayed with him through all this, only splitting up several years later for other reasons, as if there was anything worse than his murdering her daughter. My brother, after years of taking any drug he could, was then suffering from paranoid delusions and ran off into the woods bailing on a taxi fare and leaving his backpack in the taxi. He was found several weeks later leaning against a tree and had died from likely hypothermia. My father's best friend's daughter went missing in 1987. She was 3 years old. The mother was mad and blamed the father for the disappearance, and just 4 months after the girl went missing divorced him and moved to France from Argentina, where her grandparents lived. The girl was never found and presumed dead. My father's friend lost all contact with the mother and remade his life the best he could in Chile. On 2014, a woman showed up at what used to be my grandparents' house, next to my childhood house. They told her to go to my house and my mother gave her my father's number. Turns out her mother hid her for some months and then flew her to France with a fake kid. Never told her the truth until she was like 25 and claimed she didn't remember her father's name nor had anything to find him. So she traveled and just started walking looking for familiar places and ended up there because she remembered playing in the front yard when she was 2-3 years old. So not everyone turns out dead after going missing for a long time. A friend's dad went for a walk one day and never came back. They found him a week later in the woods, a bullet in his head and the gun in his hand. No one saw it coming. I got called into work once to cover for a co-worker who didn't show up that day, and later in the day his dad came into our work to ask if we'd seen him. He ended up going missing for about a week. Turned out he just woke up one morning and went frick it and drove to London and just partied for a week and didn't tell anyone. This was before everybody had a cell phone. Anyway, he somehow managed to avoid being fired and everyone was really angry at him for about a month. But last thing I heard, he was fine. My brother, 20 at the time, went missing for 3 days. Parents filed a missing persons report with the sheriff. I provided the picture. Turns out he enlisted in the Marine Corps several months prior and departed for boot camp. He told no one, not even his best friends. Not the best communicator, my brother. My uncle was dating a really awful woman. Whole family disliked her. She earned the nickname Pet. Well, one day Pet goes missing. My other uncle keeps joking he buried her in the part of the garden where nothing grows. She turned up 2 weeks later, dead at the bottom of a well. My sister is 17 years older than myself, so while I was still very young she had already moved out into the city and created a life for herself. One day, after not hearing from her for about a month, my parents grew concerned and went down to her apartment. She was gone and a new family had moved in who didn't speak English and couldn't provide us any details or a forwarding address. That was the last we heard from her for 14 years. We tried the Red Cross charity to do a missing person search but they didn't turn up any results, and this was before the age of internet, so there wasn't much we could do in terms of searching on our own. She eventually got in touch with myself via MySpace as a way of getting back into our lives. Turns out she'd gotten pregnant out of wedlock, and out of fear of being disowned due to my mother's strong religious beliefs she'd fled the country and raised the child by herself. It was very surreal to suddenly find I had a nephew in my life who is only 3 years younger than myself, and to suddenly have to welcome what was pretty much a complete stranger back into the family life. Man, do I have a story about this. About 2 or 3 years ago, I just got off of work heading to my parents' house for Thanksgiving, which was about a 3-hour drive. I go to a gas station to fill up for the journey and this girl comes up crying hard, could barely understand her. I ask her what's wrong and if she needed me to call the police. She just kept sobbing and saying, I want to go home, I want to go home. I ask her where she lives and she says Mechanicsville, which was on my way to where my parents lived. I said I don't know if I can do that. She then looked at me and said, I can't go back living with my boyfriend, he's crazy, I need to get away from him. So against my better judgment I tell her to hop in the car and told her to place her backpack in my backseat cause I didn't want her to grab something out of it and stab me or something. She gets in the car and she is still crying but she is calming down. When I looked down I see she has track marks. I think. She is real quiet most of the trip. I don't really ask anything because I don't know what to say, so I start talking to her, ask her how long she has been gone. 5 years, but then I noticed she's fading in and out of consciousness, so at this point I'm trying everything in my power to keep her awake because I don't know where she lives other than the town she told me. We finally get to the town and she perks up and gets really excited like a kid at Christmas. I drop her off at the house and I stay at the curb until she begins to slam and kick the door like someone who is possessed. Someone opens the door, this old lady drops what she is holding and they begin to hug. I take that as my leave. Anyway, I'm about to get back on the highway and a cop car pulls me over. Cop comes up and asks me if I dropped that girl off at the house and I say yeah. He then tells me I need to follow him to the station. Anyway, turns out that she was a runaway at the age of like 16 and was on a missing persons list. Turns out she met some dude, got her addicted to H and was like pimping her out or something. My uncle was missing for months. We weren't sure if he was murdered, but after a certain point, there isn't much hope left and they start searching for a body and not a missing person. He was found headless in a major river going through our city. Never found out who did it or why. He was a great person who did a lot of charity work and had a genuinely Christian attitude of love and acceptance. So we assume it was just a robbery gone wrong. My boyfriend's ex got kidnapped with hers and my boyfriend's child by her abusive boyfriend. They disappeared for about a week before they showed up at my house seeking help. She managed to get my address from her mom. I don't know how her mom got it, but I don't care. The woman managed to escape with the kid after managing to leave him at a rest stop, but not before she was beaten and arped in front of the child. Fortunately, the child was physically unharmed and doesn't seem worse for wear psychologically. The kid already had some problems, so it's hard to tell if she was affected by it. We managed to convince her to go to the police and the hospital. She had a broken wrist, a concussion, several broken bones in her face. He apparently has the FBI looking for him. We even told them where he is, but they still haven't found him. It's been 7 months. A kid at a local college in my hometown went missing after he dropped some friends off after a party. Authorities finally found his truck several months later in a nearby river with his body inside. Near the school there was a dirt access road that led to a boat ramp into the river, and he got lost on that dark road and drove straight into the water. Apparently he had been drinking and didn't have his bearings enough to escape the sinking truck. It was really sad. I remember thinking, dang, I can't imagine being the parents and for months not knowing what happened to my missing child, whether they were alive or not, whether they suffered. I know he was drinking and driving and I'm glad no one else was hurt, but dang, it was still sad to see the family suffer and see a young life lost. My oldest kid was living on her own and working 2 jobs. She would occasionally stay with friends after her shift ended, so if she didn't come home at certain times, that was not unusual. Her boyfriend moved in with her, and approximately 2 weeks later he calls me after midnight, asking if I'd heard from her. No answer on the cell. We lived in a very rural area and she traveled on gravel roads to get home. We found her in a ditch, car completely totaled, and incoherent. She was life-flighted to Omaha, and could have died. I still tell that young man, now ex-boyfriend, he saved my daughter's life. She suffered a terrible head injury and while mobile, she is disabled. She struggles with mental problems and alcohol now. We still do not know what caused her to leave the road. Lots of wildlife out there, and of course she does not remember. She also lost her sense of smell, and her time in IQ has a crazy hilarious side story. My daughter, then 21, was kept in a medical coma for a little while, for them to assess all the damage, bruised heart, bruised spleen, almost removed, bruised kidney, one hip completely dislocated, later left her with drop foot, the other hip shattered, some fractured vertebra and the head injury, and when she woke up, she was naturally disoriented. However, she had just gotten done reading the Twilight series. She seriously believed she was going to turn into a vampire. Her friends were freaking with her, saying, "Hey girl, when you get out I'm gonna let you have some of this A negative." Gestures towards her with drink cup. "Oh B please, you know I only drink O positive." Her first night awake at the hospital, she can't sleep, and she calls me at almost 2 AM. Edit, I need to emphasize how incredible this is. At this time, she cannot hold a coherent memory for longer than 5-10 minutes. She has to be reminded where she is and why she's there. However, she can rattle off a phone number like it's nothing. But I don't want to be a vampire. She only calmed down after I told her I'd kill the head vampire, which would change her back. Mom, I need to talk with Edward. Do you have his number? Me, no honey, I don't have it. Well what about April's number? Me, no honey, I don't have that one either. Well check the caller ID. It should be on there. Me, honey, you haven't lived here in a long time. If you've been speaking with them, they haven't been calling here. You know what? Never mind. I think I remember it. I'll just call them. Me, horrified about who she may call. You can't do that. It's after 2 AM. So, they're up. As soon as I hung up, I called the nurse's station and told them to take that goddamn phone away from her. This lasted 3 days, and we still give her a hard time about it. You have been visited by the Wisdom Papa. Type study well Papa or you will fail your next test at school. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.